taught in the book of Romans. Someone tell me a great soul-winning tool we find in the book of Romans.
Romans Road.
The Romans Road. What four verses typically comprise the Romans Road?
Romans 3:23, Romans 3:10, Romans 6:23, Romans 5:8, Romans 10:13. Some of those.
Yes,
Well,
all of those.
I think 9 through 13.
That's 5, but we'll allow for it.
Which one do you want to scratch?
3:10.
Oh,
That's what we did for our things all believers ought to know,
okay.
is just those 4.
Which were those
We got
four?
shortchanged.
Which were those 4 again?
Romans 3:23, Romans 6:23, Romans 5:8, and Romans 10:13.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Last week we learned Romans 3:23. This week our verse is 6:23. Next week will be 5:8. The following will be 10:13.
I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench, but when I first learned the Romans Road, Revelation 3:20 was thrown in the mix too. So,
They do that. Or they'll mess you up and throw in Ephesians 2:8-9 or John 3:16. And that's not the book of Romans, so
yeah,
they threw a monkey wrench at us.
I was just telling you.
Thank you, Ken. What's another important thing about the book of Romans? What's another major important thing about the book of Romans? The relationship of Israel and the church. What is the relationship of Israel and the church in this present dispensation?
They both get saved the same way.
They both get saved the same way. There is no difference, Jew or Greek. All are under sin, but all can be saved by grace. Israel, in this current time, has been put aside from being the unit, if you will, through which God works on the earth. Now, God called Abraham apart, and he separated his people as a special people unto himself to, 1, bring forth the Scriptures unto man, and 2, bring forth the Messiah unto man. But Israel as a nation rejected the Messiah, though many, many of the people of Israel did receive him personally. As a nation, they rejected Messiah, and they were destroyed by Rome in AD 70. Israel's time is on hold, but will return during the tribulation and during the millennial kingdom. God will again work through his people Israel. As Dr. Stelzer put it, the nation of Israel was chosen, frozen, and will be thawed. I don't have that here, but
Nice.
you should write it. It's good.
Frozen, it'll be hot.
Nation of Israel and the church are not the same thing. If we mix them up, we come up with bad doctrine. And we confuse things like, when will Christ return? And we confuse things like the nature of the millennial kingdom. Interestingly enough, the United States involvement in World War I was related to amillennial doctrine. Interestingly enough, Woodrow Wilson believed in bringing the kingdom of God onto earth. And he figured he would do that, 1, through defeating the evil nations. He figured the Germans must be evil, and the rest of the Central Powers, so he figured they had to defeat them. And after that, they would establish the League of Nations. His goal, his hopes were to try to establish the kingdom of God on earth, which dismally failed. A frustrated Germany elected Adolf Hitler as chancellor, and a frustrated Italy elected Mussolini, and World War II happened as a result of it, and then the UN came, and so amillennialism is very dangerous. Let's see. I'm kind of kidding there, but the truth is bad doctrine has larger ramifications than might be seen at first blush. Israel and the church are separate. The promises to Israel do not apply to the church. The promises of the church don't apply to national Israel. God does have a plan for his people Israel, and Romans teaches about that, how God chose his people specially. He elected his people Israel specially to use them, and how he's one day going to bring them back and We'll see about that more next week. The week after next. The book of Romans also provides detailed instruction on how a believer ought to live. Romans chapter 12 through chapter 15 give detailed instructions how we as believers are to live our lives. God just doesn't save us to let us drift away and drift in confusion, or to live however we want, to remain a people who live how they were before they were saved. But God gives us detailed instructions on how we as believers are to be a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is our reasonable service. The book of Romans also provides an interesting perspective on God's perspective on human government. Chapter 13, verse 1 says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, the powers that be are ordained of God." God validated human government. At this point, what nation was government of the world? Rome. What would characterize Rome? The what? The Roman
Imperialism.
peace and the imperialism. Authority. What's another thing which characterized Rome?
Technology advancement.
Technology and advancement.
The nations, there was an integration of nations that was very unique at that time.
A unique integration nation.
Arrogance. They knew they were the best, and why would you want to argue?
Well, I guess when you're the best, you got something to brag about. They did take over the world, but Rome very brutally put down anybody who was against her. For better, for worse, Rome was no one to mess with. Of course, everybody else was pretty fierce back then, too. So it seems if you read the James Usher's Annals of the Earth, like everybody is always killing everybody in that book. It's pretty fierce. But anyway, Rome was a mean nation. Rome was not kind to Christians at this point. Persecutions were beginning to start even now, and would be growing. The Apostle Paul would maybe 10 years after this or so be executed by the Roman government. But the command is in the Scriptures that we as believers are to be subject to government. The Bible doesn't teach Christian rebellions. We're not national Israel. We're not to try to overthrow the Babylonian Empire and seek to reestablish our own thing. Didn't work for Zedekiah, wouldn't work for us. We don't need to try to reform the culture or try to win back the political arena in this nation. We need to see a revival. And the real battle in America is a battle of the hearts of men. It's not a battle for the laws of the nation. If the hearts of men are turned unto God, the laws will correct themselves. And so we do see an interesting perspective on human government, though, and that is believers are to be subject unto it. The focus of the book of Romans, and capital letter A, the gospel of Christ is the power of God. We see 1, to save sinners from their sins, and 2, to sanctify believers for service. This would follow under the outline. Romans chapters really 1 through 5 refer to the salvation of sinners from their sins, and 6 through 8 and then 12 through 15 talk about the sanctification of believers for service. Another important focus of the book of Romans is that the just shall live by faith. A person needs faith for salvation, and believers also need faith for service. And we see another important focus of the book of Romans is that believers are not to live like unbelievers.
Yeah.
The question is posed in the book of Romans, how shall we that are dead to sin live any longer therein? It wouldn't make sense. We're dead to sin, alive to serve Christ. We're the servants of Christ. We should no longer be the servants of sin. So that's the book of Romans in a brief nutshell. We'll be going over it further next week. We'll be going over a more in-depth view of Romans chapters 1 through 8. The following week, Romans chapters 9 through 16.